This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Suspend disbelief for a moment. What you're watching is not a basketball game. What you are witnessing is inflation, the musical, starring you as the ball carrier, the ball as your money, this guy as your financial advisor, the defense as inflation, that guy as your bank, time as itself, the enemy, and the goal as Mr. ROI. Here's how inflation usually unfolds. I know, terrible example. Here's a better one. This is your roundabout mortgage rate from 1983. Here's your average home price. For kicks, here's the price of an entry-level BMW 3 Series during that era. Here's the national debt back then, and here it is now. Here's today's cost of your starter BMW in an average home in Arizona, and the going 2023 mortgage rates. So often I'll get, what's better, a cheaper home or a cheaper home loan? So let's do the math. Would you rather have a $1 million mortgage paying 5% interest or a $356,000 loan paying 18%? The P&I payment on the $1 million would cost you $5,368 monthly. The payment on the $356K would cost you $5,365 monthly. So it's about the same P&I payment and cost over the whole term. But the $1 million will cost you $1,932,480 over the loan term, while the $356K will cost you $1,931,400 over the entirety. The difference between 1983 and 2023 is a whole world of inflation, about 70% less purchasing power. Rates could go to zero, but where will that put home prices? So what's the story with the good old days? 40 years ago wasn't that long ago. I know it was before the tubes, but life seemed a bit simpler back then, despite interest rates being in their tweens. I remember my first days on the job hearing stories about first-time home buyers with 18% mortgages, only to refinance it 2 years later at 4% and feel like they got a great deal. In 1983, you could probably work one full-time job, have enough money saved at the end of the month, and count on your employer for a pension, and possibly look forward to the day of receiving Social Security. I've kissed my SSA goodbye long ago. Not that it won't be there, I just trust it won't buy anything. A $100 item in 1983 now costs $308. Should we worry about this movie when we all know how it ends? For a great time value money illustration, I found this crafty video on YouTube from Watchguard Capital. I'm going to share with you a quick snip, but I encourage you to watch the entirety to get the full effect.
I'm going to run an analysis for 50 years, from 1972 to 2022. And I like to set the initial amount to $100 so that I can convert any calculations to percentages quickly. And I'm going to backtest 3 portfolios. Portfolio 1 will be 100% US stock, Portfolio 2 will be 100% intermediate term treasury bonds, and Portfolio 3 will be 100% cash. All stocks, all bonds, all cash. And those are the underlying data sources. Stocks had a 10.5% compounded annual growth rate with a 15.6% standard deviation, and the initial $100 investment grew to $15,314 over 50 years. Intermediate term treasuries had a 6.5% compounded annual growth rate with a 5.7% standard deviation, and the initial $100 investment grew to $2,479 over 50 years. And cash had a 4.5% compounded annual growth rate with a 1% standard deviation, and the initial $100 investment grew to $938 over 50 years. And I love this graph because it shows the growth of the initial $100 investment in stocks, bonds, and cash. But also because you can set the graph to be adjusted for inflation to see what those final balances would be worth in the starting year, in this case 1972. So the $15,314 final balance in the stock portfolio would have the purchasing power of $2,177. The $2,479 bond portfolio, the purchasing power of $352. And the $938 in the cash portfolio would have the purchasing power of $133 in 1972 equivalent dollars and 1972 equivalent prices.
Welcome to 2023, the world of higher prices and higher interest rates. But the town isn't big enough for the two of them. So who has to go first? I say the path of least resistance means more government spending, cheaper money, and a higher cost of just about everything. So what did we learn from the 2008 credit crisis? We learned bailing out the banks doesn't bail out Main Street. And what did we learn from the pandemic? The math. Crisis plus spending equals crisis avoided. This time they didn't just bail out the banks, but included corporate debt, big business, small business, and even stimulus checks to individuals. There wasn't a whole lot of pain, just a whole lot of inflation. Are you catching on yet? Because it's only a matter of time before the next debacle, when we turn a double into a triple. Perhaps we bundle everything we've done before plus something genius like negative rates. Don't think we'll go there? Well, they've already thought it through. You can't believe anything they say they won't do, but what about what they say they will? In summary, the recent 3% inflation rate on its way to 2 sounds promising, but the war on inflation is hardly over. In fact, it's likely embedded into housing. Last week we learned the Fed held rates flat after the fastest series of rate hikes in nearly 40 years. So here is the dollar over the past 100 years and interest rates over the last 50. Take a look at both and tell me where you think we go from here. Father Time is undefeated, but so too is Mother Inflation. So take one last good look at these new $1 bills and say goodnight to the purchasing power of 2023.